In the grand theater of life, we all seek a comeback, a resurgence, a rekindling of our inner fire. But how do we spark that flame? Welcome to Reignite Resilience. This is not just another podcast. This is a journey, a venture into the heart of human spirit, the power of resilience, and the art of reigniting our passions.
And that even you mentioned the keyword purpose there, because what I try to encourage people really at any stage of your career, typically when we meet somebody new, one of the first things that gets asked of us, if not the first thing, it's like, what do you do for a living?
That's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you are heading into retirement or you're a retiree, that question is meaningless for you because I don't do anything for a living. You know, I save so that living gets sent back to me. Yeah. So I tell people, flip that and say, let me tell you my purpose in life. And that purpose can be defined very heavily to your career. Business owners, that's fine for you to say, my purpose is to solve the problem that I'm doing for my clients. That's wonderful. But switch it in a way that says, what is my purpose? And I work with clients both in career and post-career to say to them, let's define your purpose statement. And for me, that's like a company vision or mission statement. It's a 1 to 2 sentence thing of which then defines and gives you a check on any other activity you do. Mine personally is, I want to do the most and the best with my time for the time that God has given me. So when something major comes into play for me, I'm going to say, is this the best use of my time that I'm going to do? Am I going to honor that commitment that I've done to my purpose statement? Or do I need to not do that or redefine how I'm going to do that so it then ties back to the purpose I have in my life?
Okay, well, I think that our audience don't ask people what they do anymore for a living. It's what is your purpose in life? That's our new question, because I've got some friends that are wrestling with that, where they didn't work, but their lives were their kids. They were volunteering and very involved in their lives. Now their last kiddo's heading off to college and they're wrestling with that. What do I say now when somebody asks me what I do? And they're like, I don't know what to say. So I like this. What is your purpose in life?
Yeah. Well, and I think you can ask anyone responding to the question, what do you do? If you're still in the prime of your career, or if you are transitioning to retirement, simply just rephrasing the response. Even if someone asks, what do you do? Well, is it okay if I share my purpose? Like, who's going to say no to that? I mean, I'm more intrigued about what your purpose is rather than your title or what you're doing professionally, because oftentimes what you do from a professional standpoint is really just feeding you to actually dive deeper into the thing that is your purpose, right? We often see that one thing charges or feeds the other. I'd much rather hear what your purpose is.
It leads to a lot broader discussions that are going to happen. And I'll flip the script. So my wife and I went to a party and we were the only ones that weren't retired. And it was awkward for us because we're kind of like, how do we engage? You know, no one's coming up to you, what do you do for a living? It's just more of people dove into a subject matter. And so you just had to be ready to dive into the subject matter. I got home and I'm like, I'm so out of practice there. I need to think a lot differently. Yeah. So it's amazing to us how much of our career can define who we are. And if you can't talk about your career, it can sometimes be very tough to talk about other stuff.
Yeah. That is funny you say that, because I have a group of friends that are all retired. And they're constantly doing stuff in the middle of the week. And I'm like, I got a job. Like, I can't. They're just in such a different space. And so I totally get it. And when we do get together, it is way different conversations than nobody wants to hear about my work. They want to talk about, like big things.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. Or small things like when are they going to rebuild the retention wall on building 12?
Exactly.
That's a huge deal. And I'm like,
I don't know what you're talking about.
I didn't even know there was a problem in building 12.
Exactly. Listen, I'm great with those conversations too. Or it's I've got tomatoes on my tomato plant now, right? Like it's those little things.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I love that. So, David, with your own personal journey, this is how the Infinity Lifestyle Design Program started. You've had an opportunity to work with individuals, it sounds like, at different phases of their professional, quote unquote, professional lives. What are some of those trends that you were able to identify as you started connecting with people and doing this work?
So if you say in career, the biggest trend, well, both sides, it's communication. So for example, in career, there's a lack of communication between parties. So whether it's a supervisor team supervisor, coworkers, that typically leads to time challenges. And that's where I'm like, if you improve the communication, the leader gives permission to the team to challenge back to him or her, and coworkers talk and say, hey, can I have protected time for the next couple hours? I need to dive into that. So communication plays a huge role. On the post-career side, I will deal predominantly with individuals and couples. I do work with financial advisors and their clients doing workshops, but on the individuals and couples, particularly the couples, it's fun because a lot of times they haven't talked to each other. And a story I had, I was working with a couple, and I asked the question, so tell me when you both are deciding to retire. And the wife says, well, in 2 years, I'm retiring at 65. And the husband said, yeah, I'm looking at 75. The wife's head whiplashed around and said, oh, hell, you're not working till 75. I got things we have to do between now and then. And it was at that moment is how much couples, long-term married couples, don't talk about the individual desires and wants as they head into post-career life. And in some cases, there was one study, I think it was by AARP. So if someone from AARP listens to this, I'm off, but that basically, I want to say 15% of coupled retirees, one of them goes back to work for the simple reason to give themselves time away from the other. Because they're spending so much time. And there's 20% divorce rate for couples over 65. And part of that is tied to the fact they didn't realize all this time they were going to spend together.
Well, and I think that goes back to the number 5, the personal care. I think a lot of that is the investing in the relationship when you're in a relationship while you're still working, so that you guys have some common hobbies and common things that you like to do together, and common friends outside of work, so that when you do retire, you're on that same page. You're like, okay, now we just got to do more of what we were doing. But if you're just all into your job and you're not focusing and putting energy onto the relationships, that's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough.
Very, very well said. Yes, that's so true.
Wow. That's interesting. With this couple example, what came to mind for me was same thing. My head would probably whip around and me asking, well, what am I supposed to do for 10 years by myself? Like, what is that going to look like?
And that was the point. She's kind of like, hey, we've talked about doing all these great things. And that's another thing I try to challenge. I've had some clients I've worked with who are in their 50s, and they're kind of like, they're ahead of the curve. They want to do things right. And by the time they've developed this wonderful lifestyle strategy, I'll ask, so how are the finances? Well, they're good. Could you stop now? Yeah, I think so. Well, why wait? If you've defined a purpose in life that doesn't need to have work in it, and you have the financial resources to do that, is there any reason you want to wait? And my kids, I have kids in their 20s. They've taught me, because they're living such different lives than I'm living right now, totally different. They're more apt to say, if there's something that they want to do, I had to plan it out. I had to say, well, we'll be able to do that in 2 years when I save enough money and we're a family and blah, blah, blah. My kids will do stuff and go out. My youngest trained for a year and hiked the Appalachian Trail, just quit his job, hiked the Appalachian Trail, 2,200 miles. And I'm like, I would have never done that at his age.
Yeah.
But they are challenging me to think differently about like, okay, what are things that I can do in my life that I don't have to wait to this magical moment until I say I'm quote retired? Because what if I'm not physically able to do some of those things? So I say, why wait? If you got something cool, plan it now.
Yeah, it's that book, Die with Zero. You know, don't wait for the experiences. Time and the money now and have the experiences, because you don't know what's going to happen when you retire. So,
right.
Love it. Beautiful.
Well, David, Pam and I both have 20 somethings, and I think you're spot on. Oftentimes it's, they do things on a whim or they don't. But I think they make their decisions and their choices based off of what's going to give them that sense of fulfillment, what's going to bring them joy, and that long-term planning. I'm a planner. I like to say, I'm going to do this for the next 5 years. And then 5 years after that, I'll end up doing X, Y, and Z. They have no desire to look that far down the road because they're so focused on that present. Like, this is what I'm doing now, and here's potentially what I'm doing next. But that could change on the drop of a dime.
That's exactly right. And in my case, I'm blessed because both of my kids are financially smart too. So it's not like they're racking up a ton of debt. No. They live simply so that they have that flexibility to then decide, I'm going to go do X, Y, Z. You know, my oldest son spent 3 months in Alaska over the summer. He planned for that, so, and they're doing all these stuff. And I'm going, I would have never have thought that at that age. Cause I'm like, I need to save to get ahead, save to get ahead.
For me, the first thing I do is look at my schedule. I'm like, when would I do that? I don't see that on my calendar. I don't have the space to do it. I think there are so many lessons that we can take from our kids' generation, right? I think that's a big piece because we grew up in a different era, and there was a lot more planning and waiting and potentially not doing, right, and not experiencing it. And there's nothing that's stopping us in this day and age.
No, we have so much opportunity with technology to be able to open up just be able to Zoom and then to post to a podcast. Well, the cool thing is I get to listen to a podcast when I walk. So, I'm not multitasking because I will stop. It's just, I'm doing lower impact activities that then if something grabs my attention, I stop and I can make a note to say, you need to go back and listen that minute 30 because that was powerful. But we have so many opportunities to do so many different things because of technology. Embrace it and add that flexibility into your life.
Yeah. And I think we found that with COVID. I never imagined, Natalie and I, at one point, we had both had, our youngest were in high school and they were virtual schooling. And we were like, let's go. And we took them and went to Mexico, and they did their class from poolside.
Well, one child did. The other child did not. We won't identify which child did not.
But then we made them do stuff and experience stuff. And it's like, you could have done that traditionally. And so I think with COVID and what happened, I'd heard about parents that pulled their kids and they traveled for a year. Yeah. And it's like, there were just amazing things that came out of it. And, Zoom and being able to, I can do coaching calls from wherever. If I want to be across the country and experience something and jump on calls and teach, I can do that. So I think that's changed the way we do things and the way we look at them, for sure.
And then how do you weave all this wonderful opportunity so that you don't overwhelm yourself, so you don't overschedule, you don't say, oh, I can do all this stuff, so let me just go ahead and fill my entire calendar with, I'm blocking off a half an hour for this, even though I know it's going to take an hour. Or I blocked an hour when it's really going to take 2 hours. And then at the end of the day, you haven't done everything that you wanted to do and you're frustrated because I had a full day stuff planned. That's where you need to say, don't over prioritize, don't over schedule. Find that custom rhythm that works for you, that you can get done with the important things you need to without sacrificing.
Well said.
I think that's huge. That is huge. Oh my goodness. So communication's a big piece. One of the bigger trends that you see on both the in-career and the personal side. Are there any additional tips or advice that you would give in terms of solutions for time management that we have not touched on? Because I would imagine that that's the second highest, or it ranks up there at the top, that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Sure. A couple quick ones. I think the first one is, don't think of time management, think of time optimization. And the reason why is the word management, nothing wrong with that. It just has a tendency to be reactive. So when people manage their time, something comes at them, and we all have this first in, first out mentality. So you come in, you do that. You may have been really productive at that, but then you might have had 4 or 5 other important things that just got pushed further down the road. So proactive optimization is being you're proactive. You're going to say, I've identified what's important to me. And unless something really comes my way today that I have to stop what I'm doing, and we have those, I'm going to hold myself to my plan to the best I can. And then the second tip I'd give everybody that relates to that is, whatever you're doing that's important to you, add up to 50% more time to it. So if you're going to do something for an hour and it's important, block an hour and 30 minutes. Or if it's 2 hours, block 3 hours, because it's going to take you longer. I look back on any major important benefit in my life took me a lot longer. Think of your clients, your best clients. They didn't just happen. You had to nurture and work those, probably took you a little bit longer to get that client, but you wouldn't change it. Just give yourself that grace again of allowing additional time. If you get it done sooner, great, found time. You get to work on other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a big thing that people do, is they underestimate how long it's going to take them to get something done. And then they just don't get it done. And then they're all frazzled for the rest of the day.
Yep.
I love that.
Well, frazzled and disappointed, right? If it's something that's important to you and you don't allot enough time for it, now you're disappointed, and you're constantly scouring your calendar trying to find a spot to put it, to fill it in and do it or complete it or whatever it may be. And so if it's a priority for you, I've never taken that practice in terms of time optimization, and I am pretty regimented when it comes to following my schedule. And I'm going to take that to heart. I think just adding an extra 50% of time for those things that are important to me. Because what are you out? I mean, then you get to do something that is important to you that you enjoy for a little bit longer. Great. I think that's a win all around.
Yeah.
Yes. And it is something that takes practice, even if you might say it's not enough. Maybe it's, instead of 50%, it's double, but whatever. But just start with 1 or 2 things. The next important thing you've got coming up, say, okay, I'm going to block off 50% more time for that. See what happens. And I think you'll be either, wow, I needed that time, and now I'm great because I don't have to figure anything out. Or, oh, hey, maybe it's a little bit time for an adult beverage now to celebrate me getting done early, whatever,
Yes.
So.
Yeah. I love it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, David, if any of our listeners are looking for an opportunity or a way to connect with you after hearing this episode, how can they get a hold of you? If you could drop your handles and your website so that we could share that with our listeners.
Well, thank you. First of all, Natalie and Pam, this has been a lot of fun. For me, at least, I've had a good time because the time has flown by. So that's been great for me. So the easiest thing to do is, if you want to head to my website at infinitylifestyledesign.com, again, infinitylifestyledesign.com, the front page will give you first and foremost, if you want to take either one of the assessments, I have the in-career or the post-career assessment. It's on the front page. You can take that and you'll get a free summary assessment out of it. So it gives you the foundational elements that says, here's my strengths, here's my opportunity. And then also on the front page, you can click through to get a link. You can download chapter 1 of my book, The Time Optimized Life. It gives you a flavor of what time optimization is versus time management. and allows you then the opportunity to get this flavor of being more proactive in using your time instead of being reactive. And then anything else on there, I'm on LinkedIn's my predominantly choice of social media of choice. So David S. Buck there on LinkedIn. Just send me your connection requests. I have just mentioned the podcast though, so that I know. Okay. And then be happy to connect with you.
Awesome.
That's so great. We will make sure that we drop all of that information in the show notes as well. David, anything else that you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Just please, time, we all consume it the same way. A second to me is the same to you, but we don't use it in the same way. So your goal is to use time to the best of your ability, because regardless of whatever you do, you're going to consume it.
Oh, that's a beautiful place for us to end. Oh my gosh. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, David. I have pages of notes. Again, no surprise. And I have practices that I'm going to put into place. Not that I need to master them all right now, but time optimization is going to be at the top of my list. Also, communication popped up at my list because I figure that's an area that I need to focus on. If it's a trend that you've seen, I will put a spotlight on it in my own personal life. But I've learned a ton, and I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge, your insight, and information about your book with us and our listeners today. So thank you so much for joining us, David.
A pleasure and an honor. Thanks.
Absolutely. Well, and you all, if you want to find out what's happening in the world of Reignite Resilience, you can head on over to reigniteresilience.com, where you can see what's happening, what's in store, what's coming up. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and now on YouTube. Until next time, we'll see you all soon. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Reignite Resilience. We hope that you had amazing ahas and takeaways. Remember to subscribe on your favorite streaming platform, like it, and download the upcoming episodes. And if you know anyone in your life that is looking to continue to ignite their resilience, share it with them. We look forward to seeing you on our future episodes. And until then, continue to reignite that fire within your hearts.